30th of May 2023. In this what the fuck moment I'm going to talk about the destruction of the American position in the world. And this might be a little bit long. I'll try and be as quick as I can. If I show clips and you want to read everything on it, please stop the video and read it. Ray J Politics posted this on Twitter. I like the way he can summarize events without losing the core of the whole topic. I like it. I like it a lot. He posted this: the absolute destruction of America's position in the world in a nutshell. The illegitimate and degenerate LGBTQIA+++ ridden Biden regime has utterly decimated America's unipolar global dominance in a short 2 years. This wasn't because the majority of the nations in the world rebelled against Americans' unipolar position. It is because America abused its unipolar position. And that is very important to take note of. Now I'm going to show you a few clips to support what he is saying. First one is from Zimbabwe. Now, we all know what Zimbabwe is, and for us as South Africans, we know Zimbabwe well. But listen to this. Zimbabwe will defend Moscow. That statement is basically a nonsensical statement, but the message behind the statement is important. Zimbabwe will defend Moscow. 5 years ago, you wouldn't dream of seeing something like this. And then we get this from our own Naledi Pandor. South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Naledi Pandor, calls on the International Criminal Court to issue arrest warrants for the leaders of the apartheid Israel who are responsible for the massacre of the people of Palestine. For me, the gist lies in it, that she is speaking out and she's challenging them. And I think it's in response to the ICC warrant for Putin, but the fact of the matter is, the countries are speaking out, and this guy that made that stupid comment there, he's whatchamacallit. And then we have this. South African Communist Party chief slams the US foreign policy as disrespectful to all of humanity. The US doesn't respect other countries and never treats anyone as an equal, said the SAP General Secretary Solly Africa Mapala in an exclusive interview with Sputnik Africa. It's quite condescending and disrespectful to all of humanity that the US continues to act in this way. Equality is a paper they sign on, but upon the signing of the paper, they think that they are the superpower of the world. Anyone must kowtow to them, or else they punish you. Mapela noted that such as US behavior can be changed if countries work together to create a multipolar system. But that is why, for instance, we have always understood even the special military operation of Russia in Ukraine is a continuation of the assertion of independence by Russia and a common commitment towards multipolarity. Yeah, they speak out. These guys are speaking out. It wouldn't happen 5 years ago. And then we have this, and this is really important. Share of the dollar in global reserves plummet to 28-year record low. The dollar's share of the official gold and foreign currency dropped 58% in the fourth quarter of 2022, IMF data reveals. What happened in 2022 was a very sharp plummeting in the dollar share in real terms. Stephen Jin, CEO of Horizon SIJ Capital Limited, said, calling the decline a reaction to the freezing of half of Russia's $640 billion in gold and foreign exchange reserves. The drastic step sparked a rethink in countries like Saudi Arabia, China, India and Turkey about diversifying their reserves to other currencies. That is important to take note of. And then we get this from a Russian citizen. Disgusting, demonic and all other negative personality adjectives don't cover this mindset for even 10%. A special 10th circle of hell must be created for Graham and his comrades. And this was in response to what Lindsey Graham was saying in Kiev. Lindsey Graham, the Russians are dying, it's best money we ever spent. That thing is going to come back and haunt the Americans. And then we have this from Putin. While Lindsey Graham admits that he's happy Russians are dying, Russia continues increasing its economic success in many sectors. Recent Russian economic investments via tourism and energy in Cuba will help the sanctioned country facing 60 plus years of blockade from the US. Today, Putin left a business meeting to speak with Lula and came back to say Brazil was Russia's leading trade and economic partner in Latin America, which should improve when making key investments in national currencies. This is all, of course, not mentioning China's partnership with Russia, as well as the rising unity in the Arab world and the African continent. Meanwhile, the entirety of the global South is seeking full independence from the West, focusing on exerting national sovereignty after decades of new colonial strife. So senators like Graham can wish ill and boast their shameless hegemony, as billions are wasted on killing till the last Ukrainian and sinking the EU's economy. As US Americans face increasing inflation and chaos in their domestic affairs, and as Russia continues to make economic and diplomatic strides in spite of having the entirety of NATO contingent coming after the country as it did when it was part of the Soviet Union. That is why this is an existential fight, and why the moments we are witnessing are a transformative paradigm shift. Important to take note of that. And then more from Russia. Dmitry Peskov stated that the words of US Senator Lindsey Graham about investing in the death of Russians disgrace the United States as a state. It is hard to imagine a greater shame for the country than having such senators, the press secretary of the President of the Russian Federation said. And then we've got this, and that is just more on Lindsey Graham, and the poster says, pure evil. Lindsey Graham, the Russians are dying, it's the best money we ever spent. And now let's go back to RJ politics. Thieving of Russia's $300 billion in the USD foreign reserves, the United States blatantly stating that it would outright steal Russia's $300 billion in 2022 and rebuild Ukraine with this stolen booty, sent a seismic shockwave through the world. This began an once-in-a-century global shift. Nations in every region of the world immediately began getting rid of their USD reserves, fearing that they would be the next victim of America's banditry. Many nations also began dumping hundreds of billions of dollars in US Treasury bonds, being led by Japan, China, the UK and Israel. Now, what is important to take note of here is that there were people from the American Treasury that warned the politicians about this, but they didn't listen. Economic sanctions. The US currently has over 10,000 economic sanctions on a multitude of nations, corporations and private individuals. The world community is demonstrating that it has had it with the US weaponizing its dominant economic position and is beginning to bypass the US in 2023. Countries are finally realizing just how cantankerous US economic sanctions are to the global economy. They have also caught on to the US using these sanctions as a way to control who has wealth in the global economy and who does not. The increasing interest of several nations in expanding BRICS and the SCO are glaring examples of this. Nations are beginning to ignore constant US threats and are beginning to trade with Iran, Syria and Venezuela. I'm certain that this will soon extend to North Korea. And we can see it all over. The Russians are busy. First of all, they inspired the rest of the world by resisting the US sanctions, the Western sanctions, and surviving those sanctions, and actually blooming after those sanctions. Yes, there was a dip, but it didn't last more than a month. And today, Russia is doing well. And Europe, Germany is in recession. The Americans are heading for a big fuck up with this dollar dumping that's happening. Weaponization of the USD. The United States has greatly abused its privilege of possessing this world's reserve currency and petrodollar agreement with the states of the Gulf Cooperation Council. Several nations are now abandoning the USD at breakneck pace, and the Saudi-led GCC has all but abandoned the petrodollar. Many nations are now adopting the Chinese renminbi, Indian rupee, Russian ruble, digital currencies and their own currencies to get out from under the thumb of the USD. This is going to hurt America. And then we have this, the American hypocrisy and extreme arrogance. The United States has turned every organization into a Ukrainian cheerleading squad. The UN, G7, G20, NATO, the EU, Quad, Organization of American States and many others. Many countries' patience is starting to wear thin on the US and European bringing up Ukraine in economic climate change and humanitarian meetings. The US, who refuses to hold itself or its military accountable to the International Criminal Court, is funding the ICC with millions of US taxpayer dollars to vilify Russia and Vladimir Putin. Yet the US has openly threatened to sanction and even militarily attack the ICC if it were to detain any Americans. The US, Canada, EU, UK, Israel, South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Australia and New Zealand have all set themselves apart from the rest of the world and call themselves the rule-based international order. They blatantly ignore international law but hold everyone else accountable to. The US is so accountable to international law. Many nations around the world are questioning why the US is so hell-bent with forcing everyone to condemn Russia for its SMO, but ignore NATO's role in Bosnia, Serbia, Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Libya, Syria and Yemen. And I've done Skidmarks on that. And then we get to this. This could have all been avoided. The US and its cronies expanding NATO 1999 to 2020 caused the war in Ukraine. The EU committed economic suicide by joining US-led Russian economic sanctions, greatly disrupting their own economies. The US now demonizing China is only a last gasp effort to keep wealth out of China but in the West. The impending proxy war in Taiwan is only the US not being able to admit that the sun is about to set on its empire. And that is something to remember. And then we have this meme. Look at it. Northern Korea. I will destroy America. Iran, I will destroy America. Joe Biden, no, I will destroy America. And he did a damn good job with that. And then we have this. The US received no response from Beijing to request for a meeting between the country's defense chiefs. The US and Department of Defense have had an outstretched hand on military-to-military engagement, but we have yet to have consistently willing partners. Imagine that. The Chinese don't pick up the phone. This wouldn't have happened 5 years ago. And then we have this. The US won't tolerate China's microchip ban. Now I find this funny because the US bans Chinese chips from entering the US. And now the Chinese are doing the same. And now the US is upset about it. And they say the US won't tolerate China's microchip ban. What the fuck are they going to do? Let's wait and see. And then we have this on the debt ceiling crisis, but there's things about British officials have confirmed that Russian state assets will not be returned even after the conflict in Ukraine is over. Still only when Moscow pays reparations to Kiev. What the hell is this? This is the reason why the rest of the world is done with the West. And this is just that Lindsey Graham. And Russians are dying. That's the best money we've ever spent. But look at that face. That is the face of a fascist, Nazi psychopath. And on this one the commentator says, that's an out-loud proclamation of a Nazi and criminal core, not only of this bastard, but of the whole country he represents. And then, internet sickened as US Senator says Russians dying is the best money ever spent. US Senator Lindsey Graham flew to Ukraine to meet with Zelensky on Friday, after which he called on the Biden administration to ramp up support for the authorities in Kiev that are conducting the proxy war against Russia. Disgusting and sickening were some of the responses on social media after footage was posted online showing Graham with Zelensky. Needless to say, users on social media were disgusted with the words of the American senator. Many commented that this was true face of American politics. Others slammed the politician for being a warmonger and found such words coming from a sitting US senator very concerning. Others wondered what the US response would be if Russia was saying this about American citizens. Good questions, and I hope this will make you think. The article by RJ Politics is spot on, and I gave you some surrounding clips to give you an idea what the general mood is in the world. The Americans has got problems. And the way things are changing in the Middle East, they better take note. Now with Erdogan winning again in Turkey, the Syria thing is going to be resolved rapidly. Once that is done, every American base in the Middle East is on borrowed time. The wise thing would be for the Americans to pack those bases up and go home. Go and protect their own country. Go and protect their southern border. Look what is going on there. But I've said it a long time ago, a year ago already. I've said it. The days of the American hegemony is over. They are just struggling to accept it. The days of them walking into the room and everybody shuts up is over. It's over. And they must adjust. And they must now urgently go and seek advice from clever people of how to be a good neighbor. Please give me a like and subscribe and share the thing. And thank you for your support.